Hello everybody, welcome to my 5-minute rook ending test. And my basic idea here is to give you, in a very short period of time, a sense of your own aptitude in the rook ending. And if you fail this test miserably, you should be kind to yourself and realize that most players have trouble with the rook ending. And to have a taste of that frustration, I've given us the face of the original Norse berserker, the original rook here. These positions, I think, capture the essence of what I think is important in a practical rook ending. So hopefully you might learn something about that as well, and I'll talk about why I think that's the case in the answer section. To keep pace with our furiously fast new time controls, where often we are playing with 30-second increment, I've given the first 3 problems to be done in 30 seconds, and the second 2 a minute and a half. And right, that's the way we're playing today. And they are positions that, for the most part, your hand should know where to put the pieces. And as you see there, getting 5 right would put you in the IMGM level. And one thing I want to stress is I don't think these are that difficult, but that's only because I've had some experience with it. And so I think you can learn how to do these 5 and be at IMGM level and without too much difficulty. And one of the things I really want to stress there is if you can overcome whatever trouble you have with the rook ending, you should realize that other people have trouble with the rook ending as well. And obviously that keeps them from performing well in the rook ending, where they're very easily beatable, but it also makes them afraid to enter endings in general, which is of course a weakness. Okay, let's get started. All right. So this is a position that your hand should definitely know how to play. It's generally referred to as the Philidor position. And it's something that honestly people have a hard time with. And if you're on the white side of this, you will probably win it, even against pretty reasonable opposition. And the thing that black has to know just with his hand, or her hand, is that rook b4 needs to be played. And it's a very simple idea. We're going to put the rook on the 6th rank, and the second the pawn moves, then we play back. Let's show. Here, check. Here we just sit. If he sits, we sit. Second they push, then we run. Very simple. And now there's nowhere to hide for the black king. Okay, let's do the next one. This one obviously is a little bit of two choices, FG or king takes. And here there's just a very key piece of knowledge here is that the B pawn and the G pawn are never going to work out here. And so you got to take with a king. And probably the easiest way to remember or understand this is, first of all, this rook has to be passive. And then we can do this operation where the F pawn can kick the king away. The G pawn or the B pawn cannot kick the king away. And that's why, if you know in advance that you're going to be defending with a B or a G pawn, that you will be drawing that position. Okay, let's do the next one. Here, it's black to move, of course, and there's only one way to crack the Philidor. This is an important trick, and that's E3. If the rook takes, he will lose the rook. And the problem otherwise is we are then going to get really some kind of Lucena position now. The rook f1 kind of ends it even easier than a Lucena. But one of the things that shows is there's a relationship between the Philidor and the Lucena. They often evolve from one to the other with one little slip. They are sisters. Okay, let's do the next one. This problem I gave more time with, and a lot of people get this one wrong. And the thing that black should understand is to think about, well, what is white's fundamental idea? And what you should see is that white king is really on what we call the short side. You know, if you divide the board with wherever the pawn is to a short side of the pawn and a long side of the pawn. And the reason it's important is what we call checking distance. And I'll show you that in a second. The answer, first of all, is rook e2. And once you see this, it becomes very clear and much like position number 2, basically position number 2 with king takes g3. And of course, he cannot take the rook on e2 because of winning pawn ending. So the mistake that a lot of people do is they'll play over here, and here what's going to happen is I can get my checking distance, and this is a draw because it's so annoying for the king having to deal with the checks from the side. If that pawn were obviously to the other side, you know, let's say on this square, that would not be checking distance on that side. Okay, let's do the final one. This one, some people will complain because it might feel tactical, but I really feel that it shows a lot of the understanding of the position if you got this one right. When you look at it, white should say to himself, the only way that I am surviving this position is if I get to the blockade square. If I do not get to the blockade square, it is simply over. And people who don't understand that will be looking at stuff like rook here or rook here. You know, it's never going to work because b2, rook c8 is coming, and then b2, and what do we have? We have ourselves a Lucena position. So the answer is your mind has to stop looking at all that other stuff and force itself to think about where does the king have to go? Where does it have to go? And then you can overcome your fear of this rook a1 because this is in fact a draw. Okay, One thing I want to stress, and I'm hoping to do another video about this, is that other people will put like the Vancouver position and other positions as their like key rook ending positions. I don't think I've never had the Vancouver position. I don't know that maybe, but basically, I want to stress that in practical endgame play, you want to orientate yourself on the Philidor and the Lucena, because those will give you a sense of what king activity and rook activity mean, not just with one pawn on the board, but with a lot of pawns on the board. It means that the person with the pawn needs to use his king to shepherd the pawn in, and the defender needs to be a blockader. And the rooks help and hurt the kings do that job. That is a very good template for understanding the game, especially when you have very little time. All right, I will try to do another video on, let's call it, the practical philosophy of Rook Endgame play with an example with more pawns on the board. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this test. Bye-bye.